Let the silence do the heavy lifting. I had an incredible conversation with Tyler Snitynsky, sales manager at the Sutherland Group in Kelowna, British Columbia, Canada. We drove into his leadership journey and passion for growth, as well as the values instilled in him by his entrepreneurial parents. Now, Tyler shared insights on teamwork, leadership, and communication, and how trust, alignment, and shared vision drives true success. He also reflected on the power of stepping outside of your comfort zone, embracing feedback, and continuously evolving as a leader. We also touched on personal growth and the importance of surrounding yourself with diverse perspectives. Plus, Tyler gave us a behind the scenes look at the Sutherland Group's impact across multiple industries, from heavy equipment to road building and transportation. Now, tune in for a conversation packed with authenticity, leadership, wisdom, and lessons that create ripples to better the pond. My name is Warren Berry, and I'm your host and the founder of Instinctive Solutions. And get ready to take a deep dive on my Better the Pond podcast with my special guest, Tyler Snitynsky. Tyler Snitynsky. No, we got that right. Now,
Nailed it.
Tyler, you are the sales manager for the Sutherland Group out in Kelowna. And
Mhm.
I had met you through Dave McLean, Tech Canada. You were in the Emerging Leaders Group, and you were clearly right up there to winning the James Pond Award for contributing, developing great questions. You were just all in, and you're very charismatic and very intelligent man. And I will say that I am absolutely ecstatic to have you on the Better the Pond podcast. Tyler, it's great to have you.
Perfect. Well, thanks for having me.
So, first of all, to jump in on this, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about Sutherland Group. We know, I've met Doug, and you guys do a sort of a multitude of work. You're actually a really large firm. So,
Mhm.
can you tell my audience a little bit about what Sutherland Group does?
Sure. So the Sutherland Group of companies, we've got an integrated network of, heavy equipment experts really dedicated to solving industry-related and forestry challenges. So we got 30, upcoming of 30 years experience, and really built a reputation of helping people and communities thrive across Western Canada and the Northwest Pacific group, Northwest Pacific area in the US. So, speaking more granularly on those business divisions and what we actually do, we've got multiple divisions that span road building, drilling and blasting, heavy equipment repair, a dedicated transportation fleet with a brokerage division, and most recently, a joint venture with the Assoyas Indian Band. So, really excited to help support sales, sales process, and marketing opportunities within all those business divisions.
Yeah, interesting enough, I just saw that I think it was on LinkedIn about that just recent partnership that had just arrived. So that's pretty exciting. So, out of interest sake, can you tell me a little bit more
Yeah.
about that?
About the joint venture?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So the joint venture is a partnership with the Assoyas Indian Band, and there were probably a few things, Warren, that you saw online related to that partnership. Most recently, Schem Solutions partnered with Mercer Salgar, which is one of the largest pulp and paper facilities in Canada, and we partnered for a 5-year contract to open up a log sort yard, ultimately with the goal of growing Osoyoos Indian Band community jobs, training, education through the resources of, of Mercer Salgar as well as the Sutherland Group. So really happy for that opportunity and partnership with Mercer Salgar, but more excited to talk about how Schem Solutions can work with collaborating with government, crown corporations, and industries. So the sales process of selling um, and representing a First Nations owned company has been a little different than my traditional background of strategic enterprise transactional selling.
Hmm. Um, what did you learn from that process? I mean, anybody that I've seen, and I deal with a lot of different companies in Canada, and you see,
Yeah.
I love these partnerships and working with First Nations and all that's really exciting stuff, and the growth that comes out of it. What are some of the, what's something that you sort of learned along the way on that journey?
I think the biggest learning experiences to help support the growth of the business division is ultimately what does it provide and how does it give back beyond the economic growth of a P&L? How are I and we growing community jobs and people through the collaborations of businesses and companies? What I had to do was really take a step back to understand what does collaboration mean? What does engagement mean? And I knew that working with First Nations like the Osoyoos Indian Band really started with trust. And that was something that was built over 5 years ago with one of my owners, Chris Sutherland, who started dialogue and communication with Chief Clarence Louie and finally formalized the joint venture, making it official in early February. And without having to, I didn't want to make too many mistakes, not only starting with the Sutherland Group, and I didn't want to make mistakes with representing a First Nations company. I asked my pond, my network, hey, how can I learn more? So I picked up the book from Chief Clarence wrote, which is
Oh,
Res Rules,
oh,
and it gave me a really good perspective on the Osoyoos Indian Band, First Nations people in Canada, their history, and really set the stage for how to represent a company that was new to me. Because my background is primarily what comes from Fortune 500 companies where I've got a product or service. This is something different.
wow. Um, I've never seen that book before. So who was the chief? Who was the author of that book? I want to grab that. Throw that up again.
So Chief Clarence Louie,
Okay.
who's as the Order of Canada, wrote the book on First Nations people in Canada, about the Osoyoos Indian Band, and his goals, aspirations, and vision for how he wants to um, help put the Osoyoos Indian Band on the map and making sure that they are um, they're prospering first and foremost through job creation.
Oh, I love it. Fantastic. Love to see those things. I think it's amazing. All right. So there's a bit of Sutherland Group and a little bit about you, but I want to dive deeper now into
Sure.
Tyler Snitynsky and see Snitynsky. You're right. This is just it does it stumbles. But what I'd like to know about Tyler is what got you from being a gosling. So when I'm saying a gosling, I mean where were you hatched? Where did you start life? Right, your humble beginnings, right, when you came into the world, to leaving the nest. And leaving the nest is when
Absolutely.
you actually left. So either it was one of two things happened. Either you got kicked out and said, by the way, fly and you're on your own, or you decided to, leave on your own and make your own path. To Tyler, to where you are today. So, Tyler, what is your backstory?
So that story is the nest started in the tropical destination of Winnipeg, Manitoba, where I grew up, spent 16 wonderful years there, learning about the windiest part of the country, spending evenings and weekends at 7-Eleven, being the Slurpee capital of the world. But then I was given suitcases by my parents for my 16th birthday, saying it's time to leave the nest.
Oh,
So I applied to a few universities across Canada and visited them and went to the University of Western Ontario for business, economics, and finance, and spent 4 years completing my degree. And then I said, you know what, I kind of enjoy living in Ontario. I'm going to put my name in the hat for a few companies. And one of those companies was the uniform laundry company by the name of Cintas, which I which I did spend 16 years with Cintas working in Ontario, and then eventually transitioning to move across the country to Kelowna for the lifestyle, the environment, the outdoor activities, and yes, some of the wineries nearby are a pretty nice hobby to have on Sunday and Saturdays. So I spent 16 years there in 5 different positions, from a summer student to management trainee to operations, and then really found my calling in sales and sales development, and finished my career at Cintas as a sales manager for a good portion of British Columbia. And then from that journey, I kept putting up my hand for other opportunities. And there was an opportunity to work for another Fortune 500 company by the name of Gartner, which is a research and advisory firm. So I was able to take the skill set, strategic selling of Cintas, and I'll say amplify it and be challenged by it to work with senior level executives or the C-suite within North America. So that was a tremendous opportunity to work with Gartner as a leading advisory firm, and you're working with CEOs over screen is completely different than being in person. So that was a tremendous learning experience, building again on my the foundation of Cintas. That was a great start. But over the course of working with Gartner, there was an opportunity that arose that caught my eye at the Sutherland Group, which was a locally based company that was growing tremendously quick in multiple different business divisions. And forestry in British Columbia was, and still is, a little uncertain, a little gray. But what attracted me to the Sutherland Group was their vision and direction for having complementary business divisions
Mm-hmm.
to explore other avenues within the forestry world, and not traditionally just um, logging. Logging, having a logging truck and harvesting was where the roots started with the Sutherland Group of companies in the family. However, I've been really enjoying the past 12 months writing sales process, selling, and then most recently taking on some more marketing activities, which is again outside my comfort zone. But I'm really excited for the opportunity to have marketing and sales responsibilities to grow our business.
When you, I'd like to take you sort of a little bit back in time. You got my
Sure.
attention with this when you get a suitcase as a gift, it's a pretty. By the way, um, going back to being a kid, and where you are now as being, involved
Mhm.
in sales and things you love doing. You can tell, I mean, it's very clear to me when you start to talk about sales and marketing, you really light up. So that's obviously
Mhm.
a passion of yours. When you were back as a kid, even in, in
Mhm.
elementary school, high school, were you entrepreneurially sales minded back then? What were you doing then? You think that may contribute to what you're doing now?
Because I grew up in a farming background. The family owned a farm outside of Winnipeg. Uh, parents, my dad was entrepreneur, started a company in Winnipeg, started another one in British Columbia. So I always knew in high school I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't really know what that meant. I liked the safety and security of operations because it was predictable, it was black and white. And growing up, I think we're told sometimes we got to stay in those boxes. We're told don't talk to strangers. We're
Mm,
told be comfortable with kind of what you know. Maybe don't step out of that comfort zone. Um, but Cintas pushed me into different departments and pushed me into different opportunities because I wanted a title, I wanted a different email signature, and they said if you want to keep going, you have to go into these directions. So I learned more about public speaking,
mm.
read every book I could, applied to every public speaking I could, and really want to push myself outside of my comfort zone. And I genuinely think there's the perception of sales versus the reality of what sales does for not only an individual or person, but it really helps with creating lifelong skills.
Going back to when you were a kid, did you speak in school when you were in high school? Did you have any problem getting in front of the class and telling a story? Did you in high school, did
Mhm.
you ever get in front of get in front of the audience and just hammer it out?
Was not a leader in school. I struggled to speak in front of a class.
Interesting.
I was I had um, anxiety, was nervous, but there was a course in school called debating, and had to take it. And took debating class, and regardless of the topics, you're forced to argue, forced to research, forced to ask questions, forced to actively listen. And I think that specific course maybe was a good precipice to finding my skill set today.
Oh, I love it. That's great. Were you how many siblings in your family? It's going back to your
Yeah.
humble
So I
beginnings.
got one brother, 2 years younger than me, and we followed the same career, sort of same high school path, same university path, and he now lives about 7.5 minutes away, and outstanding on call free babysitter. They cost me a six pack, but great babysitter for my 8-year-old.
And well, hold on. The six pack come with babysitting? I don't know. That's a good
Well,
combination.
I give it to him after.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yes, yeah, I give it to him after, but
Okay.
it's a the rates of babysitting, apparently, I don't know, $20, $30 an hour. It's always cheaper for me to throw a six pack to my brother and say, I need you for a few hours.
Uh, See, sales. It's all about sales. It's how you position it. So, so your dad was entrepreneurial. What company did he start back in
Yeah,
Winnipeg and then in BC?
yeah, yeah. So he started a brokerage business for the pork industry based in Winnipeg. It grew significant. It grew fast, but it was born out of his he worked for the Manitoba Port for many years and saw an opportunity, an opening to go off and start something on his own. And I think when you do that, it's obviously a tremendous risk to family, being the only source of income. But he did that in Winnipeg for a number of years, then sold the company. And I think, like most entrepreneurs, um, they perpetually want the next challenge or the next opportunity. So he started another installation company based in British Columbia, which is polystyrene insulation, focusing on um, low-rise apartment buildings and residential and commercial buildings in BC.
Hmm. From pork to insulation. Very interesting. So
Yeah.
if you look back in time, what do you think the number one lesson was that you learned from your father?
I think there were a few lessons um, along the way. The first one was always take the high road. You want to be the one standing when the dust settles. I think just and the fact that I think people are generally good natured. I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning saying I'm going to do a bad job or try and work against you. But when you always take the high road, take the pot, the glass is always half full. I think you positivity and encouragement spreads. And when you're viewing the proverbial glass half full,
Mhm.
um, you're living a world of positivity. And you started by talking about COVID and the reasons why you want to have this podcast about hearing good news stories, because I'm not sure the last time you listened to the news or opened an app, but it's not that happy. It's not that encouraging.
That's true.
So, yeah.
What about, thank you for that. And what about your mom? So your dad is an entrepreneur. What was your mom's role, shall we say?
Yeah. Mom supported the household. Mom kept us as glue with two boys together, making sure we're always going in the right direction. Um, yeah, she was outstanding to make sure we got to our hockey training, hockey games in Winnipeg on time. And you know what? When you live in Winnipeg, there isn't much to do for sports other than play hockey.
Hockey.
So I was fortunate enough that the school I went to had a hockey rink. So for gym class, we played hockey, and you better darn well make sure you make the hockey team. Um, so that was a big part of our life growing up.
Love it. And what do you think the number one lesson was that you learned from her?
Yeah, you know what? Uh, it, it, it's an ongoing struggle that I have, and I think it's not listening; it's active listening.
Ah,
My mom does an incredible job with actively listening and listening to understand versus respond. When somebody says something we don't like, we think we want to um, we always have the answers. We want to solve the problems. Sometimes people just want to listen, or sometimes people just want to speak to be heard.
mm,
And that came up uh, 50, 10, 15 years later after I left the nest, the motherly, fatherly pond, when I asked for a 360-degree feedback form. And one of the most common pieces of feedback from people that were above, below, and beside me was listening. And
mm.
actively listening is critical for sales because people don't buy from people they don't like and trust. And if you're not actively listening to ask questions versus this is how much I know and this is how much I can speak, you don't get very far.
Right.
So I would say that would be a big one.
I love it. Can't remember which podcast I was listening to because I listen to a lot of them, but it was fascinating on with between speaking and listening is that in the relationship that the listener has a greater impact on the conversation than the speaker. And it's quite fascinating. I mean, we typically think the speaker is the one that's actually going to that is going to lead the way. The listener is actually the one that's actually become more important. So that's really interesting you say that.
We were given two ears and one mouth for a reason,
That
which you probably cliche have heard. And I don't care. Sales is your email signature. You're always selling something in HR, in finance and operations. And sometimes you have to let the silence do the heavy lifting.
hmm,
And that's hard to do when you just want to solve problems and move forward.
I'm making a note of that. I've never heard anybody say that. Let the silence do the heavy lifting. You've just been quoted.
My one of my general managers very early on gave me feedback and he said, when you want to speak, bite your tongue.
Hmm,
Because I asked him, like, how do you negotiate with these other Fortune 500 companies? It's like, bite your tongue the next time you want to speak. And I trust me, the other person will feel more obligated to speak and more obligated to respond because silence is uncomfortable sometimes for people.
that is very true. Very true. Very good. There's a little nugget of wisdom right there. So let's move on, Tyler. And thank you for your backstory. I think it's great. So what's the number one thing, either positive or negative, that's happened to you that's ruffled your feathers? And how did you respond to it?
Um, uh, I think the highlight reel is easy to comment on, so I'll do the opportunity or the negative or the downside. I think when we go through life, when we go through business, when we go through entrepreneurship, when we go through leadership, um, we take these personality or assessment tests, And going into it, we always think, well, I know what I'm good at. I know what I have to work on because people tell us that along the way. And I took two assessments, the 360-degree evaluation feedback form, and I took them with the intention of trying to understand what my blind spots were, thinking I already knew them.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to understand what those blind spots were to try to close the gap, to understand how I can improve. And I took them because I was a new leader. I was not real keen on being a sales leader. I wasn't real keen on developing others at that time in my career. I was concerned for party of one and just making some money and growing the business. And the 360-degree feedback form highlighted another gap that I wasn't very good with rapport building.
Hmm.
And you don't see who gives you those responses, but
Correct.
you can tell because I put the names for them, and I can tell based on sentence structure who said that. So um, a senior HR person had to read me my results to make sure I wasn't going to go off the deep end. And I vividly remember getting that feedback that my lack of rapport building, how I worked with people, how I spoke to people, how I interacted, um, was misaligned compared to how people rated me. And that was hard to hear. It ruffled my feathers
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like, well, my sales are good. How can I have poor rapport if this is good? So vividly remember taking that call during the week in a parking lot, and I turned the car around and I didn't go to work. I just went to Starbucks to like marinate and think about this feedback. It's hard to get feedback on things you think you're good at, the
Right.
things that you think you're strong in, and building rapport. What ultimately came down to um, how I interact with people that I don't sell to, and that was again um, finding out more about where the comment came from. I learned very quickly that the people that may not result in a dollar sold or a contract or a PO, people that I still need to um, interact with, engage with, and understand. Um, just as much as everybody else. So an eye-opening experience for how that feedback was, and I'd love to take the assessment again to see where I landed.
Mm. And so, when you unpack that and you went to Starbucks and you
Yep.
marinated and what were some of the major things that either the major things that you learned and the major things like the action steps that you took to do something different?
Um, I was being interviewed by a senior VP for another sales leadership role. And the sales leader said, hey, who's in your pod? Who's in your network? Who's on speed dial to support you? And I didn't understand the question. He's like, as you progress in leadership in life, you need to have people on your phone that you can call on, colleagues, friends, family, personal network, a pod to go to that you trust, even when the information is bad. So I went through my pod of phone numbers and I called a few people to say, this is the feedback I got. Give it to me straight. Give me examples. And yes, it cuts deep for other people to say, this is how you act. This is probably where it's coming from. This is maybe some specific situations, but I'm a firm believer that your success, your wealth, your your personal happiness quotient is really a product of the people on your speed dial, the five or
Mm.
10 people that you can call on when you need feedback about feedback, life, or assessments. And as much as we like the likes, the emojis, the number of followers that we have on our own social medias, personally, I don't think that is a network of people that I can call on because I can't call the 1,000+ people I have on LinkedIn. I'm
Right.
going to call the 10 people on my pod. So I appreciate getting the feedback. It was a great start. But to your question, I don't think it's over. And being a person who wants to improve, get better, and learn, I think it's an evolution. And being a consistent learner of yourself, of your industry, I think you need to take those assessments often and regularly.
Yeah. I love it. That's great. Thank you for that, Tyler. And I'll just add something into that, just building off of, I totally 100% agree with you. You got a handful of people, and I think, and I
Mhm.
hope that through Tech Canada, now you and emerging leaders, and you guys got a very large group, which is which is kind of rare because it's massive. But even being in that tech group and being with Dave McLean, who's also been on this podcast as well and a good friend of mine, but having those people in your corner when you need them, whether it's good or it's bad, I think is invaluable.
And add to that, those people in the corner that aren't like you, that complement and almost diversify. You want that kaleidoscope, like the picture behind you over your left hand shoulder. You want that kaleidoscope of feedback to, because even though we people, human nature, I think gravitate to people we like and trust. Sometimes you hire people that you like and trust. Um, but there's something to be said to have those types of people that are not like you, that think differently than you, that complement um, how you think and how you interact. And I think tech and the group that we're a part of does that. And the assessment we recently took at tech was very clear that even though I work with people that I think are like me, there are people that are completely opposite of me and how they think, how they move, how forward on action items, and how they interact with people.
And hence my line, hire people that you don't like.
It's a tough one because it's like hire people you don't like, but they still have to fit the culture, fit
Oh,
the role with a few other nuances.
oh, absolutely, right? But those people that you don't like are the people that do things that are actually opposite the way you do them, right? And that's how you create the kaleidoscope, which is going to lead us right directly. I think you actually did the segue into the next question. So, as you were in the group when we were working together for tech, and now that being a resident gooseologist and all, but you do know that geese fly 71% further and faster in flying in the V formation. Um, what do you think is the secret sauce? And you've been in business for a while. What do you think the secret is to getting a team? And that can either be a team that you work with in your business, or you could frame it as just what you said about the team of people you have around you to count on. But how do you get people flying in a V formation?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, it has to come to a shared vision and alignment. And to your point earlier, hire people that aren't like you, hire people that are smarter than you, which is a bit of a humble pie
Hmm.
to eat. But I think if you use the geese analogy, they instinctively understand the destination they're going and they move in unison. And that instinctual instinct has to be felt and acted in companies as well, because in leadership, teams thrive when there's clarity and there's purpose. And when everybody on the team, regardless of where you fit in that org chart, understands their role and how they contribute to the bigger picture, I don't think they just work, punch in and punch out. They're moving forward with momentum. And if it's the person that's answering the phone versus paying the bills, or all the way up to owners and CEOs, they all have to be moving forward. But that doesn't happen without the second thing, which I think is trust. And that trust is critical and key because if we're thinking about the V and how they're flying, they take turns to prevent burnout. And I think great teams really operate in the same way because leaders um, empower others to step up, push others beyond their comfort zone, but they take ownership and they take support of one another. So that is not just one person. And I think there's sometimes a misguided perception that leaders and leadership is reserved for the management team, the executive team. But everybody can be a leader in their own way when they're all moving forward.
It was almost like you were in the session with me. Um, so I just want to throw this out, Chuck. I believe that a lot of things happen in threes. So number one that you had said is sort of, a shared vision, a shared purpose. I think it's one
Mhm.
key indicator, right, that we want to use. Number two was trust, right? Trust in the people that you're along with, that you're along for the ride, you can actually trust them. Is there a third that comes to mind?
Um, yes, and it's going to be a cliche answer, but it's communication and encouragement. And the reason I say that is because I'm not a fan of geese. I can't stand the darn things because they poop all over my yard. They make a mess of my beach. But you know one thing they do? They honk when there's encouragement. They honk to warn when I'm sending the dog down. They honk to highlight what's happening around them because they're not operating in a vacuum. And nobody ever has told me in a situation, Tyler, you're over communicating me because bad things happen when people do nothing and they don't communicate.
Hmm.
So when geese honk as they fly and they make noise, that noise is coordination, encouragement, to make sure they're going in the right way. And I think strong teams thrive when there is that open, constructive, trusted communication and mutual support. And I think it's up to people like me, even though sales is sometimes perceived to be a individual contributor role,
Hmm.
need to be creative, ultimately an environment and um, foster an area kind of feedback flows in all directions. Everybody feels heard and everybody has a voice. And if that voice is not at a meeting, if that voice is not by an email, because sometimes learning through tech, um, people may not be quick starters. Maybe they need to marinate a little bit longer before they provide that feedback, encouragement, and communication.
Love it. Well, I always say geese don't honk to complain. So, right there, it's always about encouraging. What's interesting when geese are flying in that
Yeah.
V formation, their honking is actually basically it's a sonar way for them to get the feedback of where they are. They always
Mhm.
position themselves upon their own sound of right. So it's motivation and it's positioning, right? And if you think about that from a business perspective, right? Yeah, there's no such thing as over communication. So I think when I was speaking to your group, apparently somebody by the name of Tyler was actively listening. So that's very impressive. So, so the next question for you, Tyler, is what's one thing, that you're doing to better the pond, right? What do you do to make the world better, the build a better place, and what ripples are you creating? Now, this question, can be either what you're doing on a personal level. It can be doing something. What is Sutherland doing on a more corporate level, or a purpose? You tell me what ripples are you creating out there, Tyler?
We'll give you one for me that I'm trying to do, and then another one for the Sutherland Group. And I would say the one for me personally over the past, I'll say, decade, regardless of position or company, is I'm really trying to invest in others around me. When I see a young individual, I really want to try and give them the feedback, mentorship, and opportunities that help pull me along, even though I may not be part of their pod. If I can um, give a letter of reference, if I can give feedback to somebody, if I can help them with their LinkedIn profile, I really want to help reciprocate the mentorship that was given to me very early on, because sometimes there are unwritten rules in business, um, and leadership in life that somebody doesn't tell you until kind of sometimes it's too late. And small ones like when you're walking through an office, always carry a day timer and a pen. It looks like you're conducting business at all times. When you're going into meetings, regardless of what meeting, write down the topics, the action items, meeting notes, even if you're doing your grocery list. It looks professional and it looks like you're a leader. And those small nuances shared with me very early on. And as I transitioned through different stages of the Sutherland Group, or I have past experiences with hiring, coaching, and training summer students, management trainees, or young future leaders, I want to try and pass on some of those small nuances, but I have to be comfortable if they're comfortable feedback
Mhm.
in the approach, the delivery, and the reasons why, because um, I think it's important to ask, are you open to feedback first? Which is a rhetorical answer because everybody says yes. But I'm really trying to invest in others, and, and then internally investing in others by asking what I can do to help. How can we do better? Um, and really um, seeing how we can showcase those things. And then the Sutherland Group, some of our core values are being curious and adaptable, trustworthy and humbly confident, being better together to ultimately help people and communities thrive. And I ask myself, how do I do that as a salesperson? Well, we do that by having, I think, in my role, having an attitude of gratitude and really being thankful for the opportunity to meet with somebody. I'm thankful for the opportunity to get a referral, a reference, and when I am selling, supporting, advocating for growing our business or keeping our business, I think it's in our company's best interest to always take the first step of extending the olive branch for something or for making a recommendation on something, because whether you believe it or not, I think there's something to be said for good karma. And when you lead with an attitude of gratitude, of how you can help people, how you can solve problems, I'm not worried about the P&L or the money. That will come.
Mhm.
If, if we're providing integrated forestry solutions today, or we're going to go into the computer keyboard business tomorrow, I don't think it matters the product or the service. I think it ultimately comes down to people. And if you lead conversations with having an attitude of gratitude of how we can help, I think that's a great place to start. Even if it doesn't translate to a PO 5 minutes later. I think when you race to the bottom and only think about dollar signs and conversations, I think it's a misguided, shallow in my perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting on so many levels, just from what you just said, is that I mean, I love the whole idea of an attitude of gratitude, and that makes so much sense to me. But it's even interesting something as simple as, and it sounds cliche, but I do it all the time. Like, I was in an airport. I can't remember where I was. Doesn't matter. But just buying a coffee for somebody behind me, or just cracking a joke, or even I was on Air Canada, and I really appreciate the work that you guys do. I really appreciate the fact if I didn't have you, I would never get where I need to go. And it's so interesting, just all of a sudden you watch people light up, and and the ripple effect that that creates, because I mean they take that message and they put it to their coworker, who may take it to somebody home. Like it, just those little tiny things. And as you're saying, from even a Sutherland Group is on a bigger scale, it's really it's all the same thing. I just, I'm grateful, right? And it doesn't have to turn into a PO. It's about just being kind of doing the right thing.
And more to your point, it doesn't need to be um, a LinkedIn reel. It doesn't need to end up in the ESG report where we're checking a box. But if I can help connect two companies together, for example, last week, I said no to an opportunity. I want to connect these two people because even though it could be something outside of our wheelhouse or could be a competitor, at least I'm helping that person out. I'm helping that business if I have a mutual connection and I think I can help, even though it's not going to result in a sale. And to be brokers of communication, bye bye me.
And what goes around comes around, my friend. So,
Absolutely.
um, I thank you for that. That's great. I'd love to, I just love this. I'm really interested in, just the things that you say and the things that Sutherland's doing to, again, just create that ripple effect and being kind. And that's what this whole podcast is really all about. And you don't have to be a world famous CEO to do it, right? Just being human. So, last question for you, Tyler, is sort of what's one lesson that you've learned along your path? And my question typically is, what would you share with an entrepreneur today? But I'm going to sort of shift it a little bit from this conversation. Is, what's one thing that you've learned along your path that you would share with someone who is sort of up and coming, either into sales or into business? They don't have to be an entrepreneur, but somebody kind of come through the ranks. Because I listened to your story and so I can see how it all kind of weaves. So what advice would you give?
Lean in to your discomfort. And it's when you lean into your discomfort, I always get asked, or I always say, what's the worst that can happen? I leaned into the discomfort of putting my hand up for a public speaking, coaching, week-long training event where they record you, they give you feedback on the spot. Then you got to watch yourself. Really awkward and uncomfortable. But I leaned in. I leaned into that. I leaned into the opportunity to take a significant risk to move away from a Fortune 500 companies to something that I was had not do nothing about. And I'm really enjoying the opportunities that I've been given the Sutherland Group and the direction of where you're going. And when you lean into something that's uncomfortable and it doesn't have $1 million risk assigned to it, the answer is, well, what's the worst that can happen? Because if anything, you'll learn from it. And I don't think learning happens in our comfort zone. I think learning happens when we're leaning into things that we don't know and understand. And I think 90+% of the time, if I'm leaning to things that I don't know or understand, I'm going to learn something from it and move up, out, sideways, or forward. Um, and we could stay here for another hour, Lauren, talking about AI, but I'm a strong advocate of technology and AI. I'm leaning into it because I think it's going to be outstanding for how we harness, let's say harness the technology. But when you lean in as an entrepreneur to things that are uncomfortable, different, I think you grow from it. And when I've started in Winnipeg, leaned into um, public speaking, leaned into different school system, leaned into traveling across the country, leaned into different roles, leaned into changing from operations to sales to leadership. You find your passion along the way.
Mhm. I love it. Yeah. I mean, I heard you say it many times. You use the word comfort zone, out of my comfort zone, use it actually quite a bit. Uh, so interesting, yeah, you never grow in your comfort zone. So, right, when the wind
Well,
is blowing down Portage and Maine and it's going, right, it's coming at you, which way do you lean?
now when you lean in and which way do you lean, you just got to be careful because I think confidence builds confidence. But there's a very fine line that I have been given feedback on. If you're overconfident, people, situations, scenarios, or events, that can also get you into trouble. But being overconfident, because you have a competence based on how you leaned, it's it's a balance.
I think you just wrapped it up right there. Confidence builds confidence. You're the first one who's actually ever said that. So I'm that has now been officially captured. Yet another quote from Tyler. This is great. I have one last question for you before we wrap up, Tyler. Is if you were standing on the top of a mountain and the whole world was listening to you
Mhm.
intently,
Mhm.
what would you say?
I would say, how do we go higher? Number one, if you're at the mountain, you're at the peak. I'm going to say, how do we go higher? And I say that because there are times, situations, and scenarios where we think we've reached the pinnacle of our career, our happiness, our finances, but there's still opportunity for to go higher. And in my Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think self-actualization is the top. So how do we go higher? How do we act, move, and position ourselves to get to whatever that next step is in life, with a caveat and asterisk that falling could be okay, but fall with a network of people around you, fall with assessed risk, fall with understanding of what might that look like, but how do you push for more and how do you go higher? Because um, I don't think anybody wants to stay in their same. I don't think anybody wants to be the same today as they do tomorrow, and that would be my feedback when you're at the top of the mountain.
Absolutely sage wisdom right there. So
Yeah.
it's it's interesting, to wrap this up, Tyler. I mean, thank you for this conversation. That this is great. And as I'm listening to you, and and if I can sort of put into perspective of just like, what you learned from your dad of taking the high road, right? Ultimate positivity. You can tell you're a positive guy. You got to, your glass is half full. It's emptying as we go on the podcast here, but it's half full. But then, and then you have your, your mom side of active listening. And then I listen to you saying, how do we get it? How do we push the comfort zone? How do we push limits? How do we get better? And I listened to those three little pieces sort of kind of really wraps up really quite nicely, everything we talked about today. And I think that also from what I'm hearing is that it makes you a really impressive and dynamic leader that people would love to follow.
Just and to correct one thing, not to follow, to be supported by. Because even though, yes, follow, there could be people behind me, but my job as a leader is to understand when other people can lead the flock and the geese and honk all around us. So, um, yes, I'm passionate about leadership. I'm passionate about personal development. I kicked off the year with 2025 goals of family, health, professional, and short-term and long-term goals. So I have leaned into some of them, which is why you can't see, but I'm wearing running shoes today. And I'm signed up for the Vancouver Marathon, which is something I've never done before. But my running shoes today are the reasons why I'm not wearing dress shoes, because my back hurts, my muscles ache, and everything hurts from training for a marathon.
Well, it's not going to run itself.
And I got to start somewhere. I created the two of things that I want to accomplish in 25, and marathon was number one.
Love it. I have my list somewhere around here of my 2025 goals too. So you and I are on the exact same, although I will not be running a marathon, but I have my other things that I want to do. So Tyler Snitynsky, so you got it right. I really want to thank you for your time. I really want to thank you for your stories. I want to thank you for everything that you're doing to better the pond. And working with Doug and the rest of the flock at Sutherland Group. Really making an impact out there for not just you guys, but the whole entire community. So if anyone wants to find you, Tyler, where do they go?
I only have LinkedIn. I've made it a commitment that uh, not to have any other social medias, because I want to be focused on the people in front of me, people that influence my health, wellness, and business. But I am on LinkedIn, Tyler Snitynsky, and I'm sure Warren, you'll provide the spelling of my last name.
I will.
People wanted to connect with me and talk about health, wellness, personal development in their own way.
Perfect. I love it. So there you have it, folks. We had a great time and some great stories and some great sage wisdom from Tyler Snitynsky. And this is Warren Barry, and I'm flocking off to take you beyond the pond to better the pond because we're better together. Thank you so much, Tyler.
Thanks again.